I'm Brandi Kruse. Coming up today on Undivided, we hear from the mother of two twin seventh graders who were featured in our documentary Operation Indoctrination, why she now fears retaliation and says the school district has not learned its lesson. Plus, this might be the funniest billboard in all of Seattle. Well, funny if it weren't so sad. And Jaskaran Singh is out with a new political ad, and it is straight fire, as the kids say. That and more coming up today on Undivided. Remember, you can support our show for just $5 a month by signing up at undividedpod.com. Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you so much for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi Kruse. We appreciate all of you who tuned in for the airing of our first ever Undivided documentary last night, Operation Indoctrination. I will say we have, even before we aired it last night, we were getting information from the Olympia School District and from parents because we had sent out a trailer to that documentary that the school district was kind of all aflutter, that there was a lot of freaking out behind the scenes. There has been a lot of reaction on social media pages to the documentary, including from a vice principal who we've decided we're going to put on blast tomorrow for his reaction to the documentary. And I think it shows you that when people are unhinged, I mean, you know, one of the things about it is it focused on the stories of kids. So in order to dismiss it, you have to dismiss the individual stories of all four of these kids. Two of them, siblings. The older two who just graduated, not siblings. So you're talking about four different stories. And so we're going to be focusing on this tomorrow. But for teachers in that district to be, and educators elsewhere to be attacking these kids is somehow having a political agenda of their own is sort of hilarious and shows how desperate they are, as opposed to, I don't know, attacking the teachers who very clearly are caught on tape and in other circumstances pushing their political agenda on kids. So we aired that last night. I encourage you, if you haven't checked it out, we just posted an extended version of it early this morning across all of our pages. I want to talk about some obvious fears involved in having these kids speak out. We're going to be joined on the show today by the mom of the two twin seventh graders who sat down and spoke to us about what they went through in their sixth grade science class when they were visited by a teacher named Karina Champion who came into the class to give a guest presentation. But there's a couple things, if you haven't watched the documentary yet, that really stand out to me as being particularly egregious. One of them had to do with these two, they just graduated from OSD. They were in the seventh grade class of this teacher at the center of the documentary, Karina Champion. So this was 5 years ago. And they wanted to speak out now about what they went through because they heard that it's still happening, that this particular teacher in the Olympia School District hasn't been held accountable for her years of pushing her political and social agenda on kids. And one of the aspects of this conversation with Rory and Jameson that really stuck out to me is the obsession this teacher had with LGBTQ issues and the fact that they were made to feel like outcasts for not being LGBTQ. Here's a clip. From what you guys have said, it seemed like if you were in the class and you were LGBTQ or you changed to identify as LGBTQ, that you felt as if they got special treatment.
Oh yeah, they were treated like royalty in the class.
Let's talk about that a little bit more. So how did you, because are you guys both straight? Were you straight in the seventh grade class, all of that? So from your perspective, can you just tell me how that would manifest? Like, why did you feel like they were getting special treatment?
Well, it would be like her little group that sat closest to her. She would always talk with them. They would always get called on in class. You know, they could have their phones out if they wanted, play games, whatever. Basically do whatever they wanted.
She claimed that I was unhealthy for the environment. I was creating an unsafe environment because there were viewpoints that I would like point out. I was like, hey, you're using that to get attention from the teacher, and she didn't like that. Said that I was transphobic.
Who called you transphobic?
Champion.
Your teacher
called you a 7th grader transphobic.
Yeah, and she said that I was like having toxic masculinity, stuff like that.
Did she call you transphobic and accuse you of toxic masculinity in front of other students?
Yeah, it was, so there was a particular student who ended up becoming trans, and they would change their gender back and forth like weekly, and I misgendered them once, and that's kind of when it started, was then.
Wow, so by accident, because it had gone back and forth so much.
Yes.
She called you transphobic. How were you treated after the teacher in the class labels you a transphobe? Did that cause other people to treat you differently?
That whole group like outed me, didn't want to talk to me, didn't want anything to do with me. So, yeah.
Bullying.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. Could you see that happening as well, Rory?
Definitely. Yeah. We weren't allowed to sit where they sat because we were homophobic and everything like that, because we were straight. I personally identify as a Christian, and because of that, I was automatically homophobic, even though I'd known most of these people since kindergarten, first grade.
Was the bullying ever happening in front of Miss Champion?
Oh, yeah.
And
She encouraged it.
What do you mean encouraged it?
Oh, she would put in her own little 2 cents into it, and she really wouldn't stop it or anything.
So if the bullying was happening from the LGBTQ students, it was just fine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But if it happened the other way around, they were homophobic and they were outcasts in the classroom.
So, you've talked about kind of like looking back and feeling like you were bullied and excluded because you weren't gay or weren't trans. How has that experience stuck with you through the years since?
So I have a lot of issues as far as if a group of people has a disagreement with me, I kind of freak out about it and have like a whole bunch of anxiety because of it, because it reminds me of back then from when everybody seemed like they were against me. So yeah, it's very anxiety inducing.
How insane is it to think that a teacher would call a 7th grader a transphobe? And this is 5 years ago, really before I think the transgender ideology thing really heated up. And so it shows you how deeply seated it's in this teacher. And should I say allegedly? Sure, fine. Allegedly called him a transphobe. But there is nothing, I don't think there's a person with a sane mind who can watch these 2 former students 5 years later and say, oh no, they have an agenda. They're not even in the school district anymore. They're trying to start. In fact, they were very worried about sitting down with us. Both of them are going off to college and careers. And so they knew that there could be implications of sitting down with us. And so nowhere in my mind do I think that that he's making up that his 7th grade teacher labeled him a transphobe, and as a result, he was bullied by other students in the class who were LGBTQ, and he was shunned. And I think what's so powerful about that is it shows, it has its roots, I think, in this DEI ideology, right? You have this DEI ideology where you want to lift up historically marginalized groups. But in doing so, you've lost the forest through the trees, and you're now pushing down other groups of people. So it's not about equality, it's about equity. And so if you have to push other people down or hold other people back in order to make it a level playing field, you're seemingly okay with that. And that's crazy, right? That's absurd. So when you apply that to what these kids went through, and to, you have this teacher used to be married to a man, ends up, in a same-sex relationship, like I said, that's totally fine. That's not an issue, but feels so passionately about LGBTQ issues. So I'm sure, we're gay students. I mean, certainly back when I was in high school or in previous years, were they the ones bullied? Yeah, I think they were. And so you have this teacher who's trying to right a wrong by reversing it. And by saying, whether she realized it or not, I'm going to give so much deference and support to these LGBTQ students that the students who aren't gay, who aren't transgender, are going to feel bullied and left out. You're doing the opposite. Again, same on the DEI track, and I think that's what's so stunning to me. She was so lost in her ideology, she couldn't see that she'd created the very environment that she was trying to help make better. Around bullying, there's also, I think, this substantial issue at the center of this, where you've got a class of 20 students, which was the case for them at the Olympia Regional Learning Academy, which is part of OSD. And they said, beginning of the year, maybe one person was LGBTQ. And then by the end of the school year, with this one teacher, half the class, approximately, was some version of non-LGBTQ, gender diverse, using different pronouns other than the ones they were born with. That is the result of indoctrination. And to have these now, graduates of OSD reflecting on this and realizing, hey, there's other kids that are still dealing with this in this district. And it's more than just this one teacher. In the documentary, we cover all sorts of instances across school districts with varying teachers at the school board of this political and social agenda. But I think the Karina Champion storyline is by far the most powerful, because there's so many examples of things she has done over the years that frankly should have cost her job. I really believe that. I don't believe that this is a teacher who is fit to continue to work with students, particularly students of this age. So you have these two graduates, Rory and Jameson. They learn that this is still happening in Karina Champion's classes. They decide to sit down, speak out, despite the implications for them. But I think what I'm really worried about, and what we're going to talk about a little bit today, are these two, the twin seventh graders, Peyton and Reese. So they're still at Orla. They are still today, they are at the Olympia Regional Learning Academy under the same roof as Karina Champion, who they've now very publicly come out and criticized. One of them, of course, Peyton, the girl, she's the one who recorded this political tirade that Karina Champion went on, calling Ronald Reagan a homophobe, talking about all these lies about the Trayvon Martin case, including saying that Trayvon Martin was about their age when he wasn't at all, and that he was killed by a white supremacist who was never charged. In fact, he was charged. He went to trial for this. So just a bunch of lies. And then, you hear from these seventh. I just want to play a clip again from the documentary with Peyton and Reese. Again, they're so innocent. They were sixth graders when this happened. They're seventh graders now. They have no reason in the world to be making this up. And they said when they found out that Karina Champion was going to be in their class, they automatically, even at that age, knew her reputation and had concerns about what she would talk about.
What was your reaction when you learned that Miss Champion was going to come into the class?
I was just hoping that she wouldn't bring any sort of politics into it beforehand.
Why would that be your reaction?
She's just kind of known for it, and there's political stuff outside her door and like in the hall beside her door, and it's like, I don't want that in the classroom.
Did you worry about that too, Peyton?
It was a little bit concerning to me, but I was thinking, let's see the best in people. It's about bugs. It's about a bug quilt. How can she turn this possibly into whatever? Like, how can she turn this into something negative or positive? Mm-hmm. But I wasn't prepared or expecting what happened.
Yeah, and of course what happened is a political rant that was so bad that even a sixth grader knew, despite the fact it was against the rules, she should pull out her cell phone and record it so she could bring it to her mother and her dad and say, hey, this is what happened in class today. Can you help me understand what's going on here? So coming up later in the show, we're going to talk about some other education issues first. But the mom of those two seventh graders, Jake, is going to join us on the show to talk about what's happened since her daughter made that recording, the retribution she feels like is being carried out against her family, and that even since then, there has been a clearly inappropriate lesson that their mom found out about at Orla that has her questioning, again, is it time to pull them from the school entirely? So we're going to have that interview coming up later on in the show. First, I want to continue on this education front and talk a little bit about the absenteeism problem. So we've talked a lot about test scores, right? A lot about political and social indoctrination, and a lot about enrollment. So enrollment is declining. Test scores are down. Teachers in some of these districts are being allowed and encouraged to bring their personal agenda into the classroom. An issue we don't talk about as much is the issue of absenteeism. We know that the number of students who are attending class, the percentage of students who are attending class in Washington State on a regular basis has been declining. And it's actually gotten worse since the pandemic. So Washington ranks 9th nationwide for the chronic absenteeism of students. That rate is higher than the national average. It's twice as high as it was during pre-pandemic, rather. In 2018-2019, the last full academic year before the pandemic, 15% of Washington's K through 12 students were deemed chronically absent, compared with 30.3% in 2022 and 2023. So now the state is trying to do something about it. Let's see if this government solution is a waste of time. Oh, of course it's going to be, but let's talk about it anyway. So this from the Washington State Standard, how a tool built in Washington is helping students fight absenteeism. Well, this already sounds like a bunch of red tape. It says, with student absenteeism at record highs, more Washington districts are using a tool developed by researchers at Washington State University to help get kids back on track. It's called WARNS, W-A-R-N-S, or the Washington Assessment of the Risks and Needs of Students. About half of Washington's districts will use the tool this year. It projected 146 of the state's 295 districts, up from just 90 in 2019. So more districts in our state are using this tool. So what is it? Well, it's a 40-question web-based assessment for middle and high school students, and it's meant to help figure out why individual students are missing classes and what they need to stay in school. WARNS asks kids detailed questions about their relationships with their peers, mental health issues, family environment, school engagement, and more. Once a student finishes the assessment, both the student and the school receive a set of scores indicating their risk level for difficult outcomes. So I think what's interesting about when I was a kid, right, when I was in school, if there was an issue, you had a school counselor, right, that would talk to you about whatever problems were at home. And they know the kids who are chronically absent. And so there's no reason in the world where if you've got kids at the school who are chronically absent that you're not immediately addressing that individually with students. This idea that you need some sort of 40 question assessment to figure out, what are are you having mental health issues? Are you doing this? Are you doing that? And that this bureaucratic sort of red tape thing will help you figure out what's going on is ridiculous. And all the while, we have a system and these policies at the state level that are designed to basically tear kids away from their parents and to drive a wedge between kids and their parents. So parents have less and less of an idea about what's happening with their kids, what their kids are telling their teachers at school. There is literally a code of silence that's enforced by OSPI around issues like gender identity, which obviously has a nexus with mental health issues. If you're gender dysphoric as a seventh grader and your parents at home don't even know it and you're dealing with all these mental health issues. So the schools want to fix the issues that are causing kids to be chronically absent. But meanwhile, they are eroding the bond and the communication between schools and students and parents. And they expect the issue to get better. Lack of parental involvement, lack of importance in our society put on a quality education and academics. Again, you're just passing students. What did we hear in the documentary yesterday? We heard from the student that they rarely had any academic assignments and that in their science class, maybe 20 to 30% of the class was spent on actual academic assignments. So why would a student have it in their mind that academics and attending school is important when you're not even as a school putting an emphasis on academic achievement and academic excellence, the importance of being at class, the importance of doing well. Like, yeah, you can fail. We went through this period during the pandemic where it's like, no student can fail. We'll give everyone like B's at the worst you can do is like a B. So kids can not turn in assignments, not do tests, not show up at school and still pass. And there are no consequences. So why would they believe? And you wonder, you sit there and say, well, maybe we should put together a 40-question assessment. No, maybe you should make sure kids know that they are accountable for outcomes. They're accountable for their behavior, and that we have a grading system, and that grading system is going to assess your dedication to your academics. And if you're getting a low score, there are consequences for that. You can't be part of athletics. You might not graduate. You might be held back a grade. Instead, we pat all the kids on the head and we say you did a great job, when a lot of them are very clearly not doing a great job. So again, assess that. Breaking apart of the nuclear family, the state driving a wedge between kids and their families, the state and the schools being ordered to keep secrets from parents about what's going on with their kids' lives. This wishy-washy grading system where we don't want kids to fail in the name of equity, DEI, like we can't do that. There's disproportionate outcomes, so we'll just send everyone through. There are no lower punishments for kids who are obviously engaged in inappropriate behavior in school. Oh, we can't discipline them because that has unequitable outcomes as well. So if the outcomes aren't equitable, we just won't discipline anyone. And then you wonder why you have chronic absenteeism, and it's the government, so they believe the solution is more government and a 40-question assessment to see what's going on with their kids' lives, when it's very clear to you and I and to anyone with a brain what is going on that's leading to these issues of chronic absenteeism. And the societal implications of that are severe. So we talked about the King County Prosecutor's Office had teamed up with some schools, other law enforcement agencies to try to deal with this issue of violence and crimes in and around the school environment. So there had been a couple of shootings at schools that were clearly gang related, right? There had been some violent behavior at schools, and Lisa Mannion, the King County prosecutor, and all these entities getting together again, like a task force. We need a task force and a ticker tape. What do you call it? A ticker tape parade?
Sure.
Like we need all these things. Task force, panel, I don't know, ticker tape parade, all these things to try to figure out all the way around the issue, as opposed to somebody just saying, nope, that's the issue right there. Like that's the problem right there. And so Como News talked to prosecuting attorney Lisa Mannion and a senior deputy prosecutor we actually had on the show to talk about juvenile crime. She's the lead of the Safer School Strategy, Jamie Kvistad. And she said that one of the things they've realized that is a common thread with students who are charged with crimes is that the students who are committing criminal behaviors also happen to be, shock of the century, the students who aren't attending class on a regular basis. Who would have thought? Here's a clip.
School is a protective factor. We really need to and want to get our young people connected back and re-engaged with education.
Kvistad at a roundtable discussion reports a lack of school attendance can lead to youth violence and crime. In fact, data from the state superintendent shows that of the 57 K-12 kids charged with unlawful possession of a firearm since January, about 10% of them were not enrolled in school and 85% had some sort of partial enrollment.
We are dealing with a generation that sociologically, I don't think we really understand how lasting the pandemic, was on them.
I'm sorry. Let the pandemic go. Can you play that clip just one more time? Because there's some assessments I want to do of some individual clips here.
School is a protective factor. We really need to and want to get our young people connected back and re-engaged with education.
Kvistad at a roundtable discussion reports a lack of school attendance can lead to youth violence and crime. In fact, data from the state superintendent shows that of the 57 K-12 kids charged with unlawful possession of a firearm since January, about 10% of them were not enrolled in school and 85% had some sort of partial enrollment.
We are dealing with a generation that sociologically, I don't think we really understand how lasting the pandemic, was on them.
Yeah, I don't think that kids who had to stay home during the pandemic automatically went out and joined a gang and picked up a gun. Now, I do think that absenteeism and not going to class and not being in a stable, I agree with that, not being in a stable environment can lead kids down a path of having, some sort of behavior that's not societally acceptable. So I understand what they're saying. I understand the tie and the nexus of all of those things. But, and I do think mental health has a part to play, but it seems like everyone is beating around the bush and refuses to just say what the actual problems are, and refuses to say, we have no punishments in society. There's no punishments at school. There's no standard for them at school. There's no punishments for them when they commit crimes as juveniles. We want to hold their hand and act like everything's okay. So now they have grown up in this environment of permissiveness. And they probably have a lot of permissiveness in their home environment as well, where it's like, oh, I've got a 13-year-old who's out doing whatever with his friends at all hours of the night, and the parent just doesn't seem to care. And do I say it? I can't get canceled, right? A lot of this is happening with young black men. When they say there's disproportionate outcomes, right? And you hear this all up and down the criminal justice system. What they say you're racist for saying is that the disproportionate outcomes are a result of a disproportionately high number of young black men committing crimes, young black men being absentee from school. And so you have to, unless, I've said it a million times, unless you're willing to properly identify the problem, you can't fix it. So it's not that the system is creating disproportionate outcomes. That's what the left wants you to believe. It's that disproportionate outcomes exist, and so we need to get to the bottom of that. So they want to let me explain that better. They want to make you believe that that you have the cops and schools and all this, they are choosing to arrest, to discipline young black men at a higher rate. They're choosing, what they want you to believe is that you've got a white student and a black student that do the exact same thing. And they want you to believe that the cops and the prosecutors will charge the black student and not the white student, or that the school will punish the black student and not the white student. And could that happen? Sometimes, sure. But what's actually happening is that you have young black men at a higher percentage than they are of the population committing crimes and engaging in antisocial behavior at school in the county that I'm referring to, and the problem that they're dealing with, a lot of gang activity. Now, I do believe, sorry to go on a tangent and a rant about this, but I'm very passionate about it. I do believe at the root of that is racism, but I'm talking about 100 years ago, plus 200 years ago, and back and back and back. Because I think that a lot of the inequity in our society for black people in this country does have roots in slavery, where we had generations of black Americans who weren't able to build wealth, were literally prohibited from building wealth. And so they are a few generations behind of a lot of white Americans. Not every white American, but a lot of white Americans. So I fundamentally believe that. But we can't do anything about that now. I mean, we're hundreds of years removed, 100 from some of it, like Jim Crow laws and all of that. But it did lead to more impoverished communities for the black community. And that leads to other issues like absentee fathers. That leads to other issues like economic hardships, where maybe a parent says, you've got to work, you can't go to school, or a parent is working 2 jobs, and so they're not even focused on what their kid is doing. And so, yes, there are issues involving this different realities for white students and black students or students of color. But the problem isn't that the school system or the police system is creating these disproportionalities. That's the idea that we have to completely abandon. And we have to start holding every student accountable, regardless of the color of their skin and regardless of whether that looks to you like it's disproportionate. Like, well, gee, Brandi, if we hold every student accountable for their grades or their behavior or their absenteeism, there's going to be a much higher percentage, as a percentage of the population, of black students held accountable than white students. And you just say, I don't want to see that ugly reality. So your choice is to bury it and blame it on the system or blame it on the racism of teachers or cops or prosecutors or whatever it is. Are you following me? But we just have to be okay with acknowledging the reality, not saying that's racist to say that, because it's not. And then we can begin to fix the problem. But it starts with accountability, true accountability, not diminishing other behaviors because you don't want people to know that there's a disproportionately high number of black students or students of color who are engaging in antisocial behavior outside of school. Are there white students doing it too? Yes, but as a percentage of the population, it's not as high. And that's just the truth. And that's the kind of thing that I would never be able to say on Fox. That's the kind of thing I would have never been able to say in old media, but that is the truth. And until we identify the truth, hold all these people accountable, hold teachers accountable for their failures, then we're never going to deal with the absentee issue. We're never going to deal with the decline in public education, and it's going to continue to get worse and worse and worse and worse. All right. Wow. I really ranted about that too long. Much more coming ahead on the show, including that interview with the Olympia mom. We're going to talk about and assess some reaction from the documentary. First, Naches RV Resort Phase 2 is now open. You can reserve your private showing for the weekend of October 5th and 6th. So if you've been wanting to go check it out, making a reservation for October 5th and 6th is a great idea. They've got 12 extra large RV lots starting at just $89.9. And if you don't own an RV, you can go check out their stunning turnkey park models. Perfect way to make Naches RV Resort your home away from home. They also just opened their brand new, huge 4,300 square foot clubhouse. Absolutely luxurious. You're not going to find anything like it at any other RV resort in the entire state. It's an entertainer's dream. They've got plenty of space in there, a gourmet kitchen, gym, fitness center, showers, laundry. You absolutely have to see it. And then outside, they've got all these amenities and things to do. They've got pickleball and tennis courts, a playground, a dog park, miles of recreational trails, and a beautiful saltwater swimming pool and spa. Is going to be open in just a few weeks. So just a short drive from Seattle, but a world away, 300 days of sunshine, year-round family fun. So reserve your showing for October 5th and 6th. Naches RV Resort, they've got 12 extra large RV lots available, starting at just $89.9. NachesRVResort.com, NachesRVResort.com. All right, listener Lee sent us probably the most hilarious billboard I've ever seen in my life. Let's talk about it in our segment, Unbelievable. Boop. Okay, so thank you, listener Lee. This was in Seattle. Sounds like it was on Capitol Hill. It is a billboard for the Seattle Times. It reads, "News that holds those in power accountable." Well, that's nice, isn't it? News that holds those in power accountable. The Seattle Times. Subscribe to us. Fascinating, given that they have been doing the exact opposite of holding powerful people accountable. And in fact, they've been giving powerful people a free pass, as we have detailed over and over and over on the show in the last few weeks. For example, they had this phenomenal reporting, in theory, on the issue at McNeil Island. They had a story, Washington could find hundreds for sexual violence. Then it quietly began releasing them. And I thought, wow, a great piece of journalism from the Seattle Times, talking about how Bob Ferguson and the Attorney General's office have been releasing all these sexually violent predators quietly behind closed doors. And then he's bragging on the campaign trail that he's actually protecting communities from these very violent sex predators, only to read the entire lengthy article and realize that they didn't mention Bob Ferguson even one time by name. So what does the billboard say? Was that holding the powerful accountable? No, it was pointing out something that's happening and then blatantly refusing to hold the very powerful person who's responsible for it and who's lying about it on the campaign trail accountable. And not to mention that the Seattle Times editorial board then turned around and endorsed Bob Ferguson for governor, despite the fact that they acknowledge he has some serious lapses in transparency, like when his office hid 11,000 pages of documents related to a lawsuit brought about by the estate of a developmentally disabled woman who was abused under state care. And a judge said they willfully withheld evidence in that case. By the way, if a law enforcement officer was found to have willfully withheld evidence, you don't think that Attorney General Bob Ferguson would prosecute him? And despite the fact that AG Ferguson also 3 years ago pushed to decriminalize hard drugs like fentanyl in the middle of a fentanyl crisis, which is creating our homeless crisis and our crime crisis, and the Seattle Times editorial board said, we'll endorse him anyway. Is that news that holds those in power accountable? No, it's not. Another example, the Seattle Times editorial board endorsing Kruse for superintendent of public instruction, despite the fact that they refused to endorse him before the primary because they said educational outcomes have been that bad, and he refuses to take accountability for his failures. He likes to blame other people. Like this week, he had a choice to either blame himself or blame the budget, so of course he blamed the budget. But they still turned around because, oh, God forbid, we can't endorse a conservative for anything. So they endorsed Kruse for schools chief, despite the horrible state of our education system under 2 years of his leadership. What is it again? News that holds those in power accountable? I don't think so. Let's see. They also recommended, the Seattle Times editorial board recommended keeping Washington's Climate Commitment Act, saying vote no on Initiative 2117. And they did that despite the fact that they know damn well that powerful people have been lying about the Climate Commitment Act, including the most powerful person in the state, Governor Jay Inslee, who repeatedly lied to us about the fact that the CCA would increase gas prices.
At what point are you going to tell the people of Washington State that they're going to possibly see much higher gas prices next year because of the CO2 emissions tax?
Well, that's not true. They're not going to see much higher gas prices, maybe even lower than they are today. This is going to have minimal impact, if any, pennies. We're talking about pennies potentially.
Yeah, so the governor gets to lie about it repeatedly over the course of now 2 years. And the newspaper of record still says, well, he should get to keep the policy that he's spent all this time lying about. Is that, what is the billboard again? Is that news that holds those in power accountable? I don't think so. So I'm kind of curious how they came up with that slogan.
Well, that's why it's up in Capitol Hill.
It should say
because
news that
tends to be the people that don't care.
It should say news that holds those out of power accountable.
That might work.
News that holds Republicans accountable. Can we crowdfund a billboard, people?
We really need to.
We need a billboard. We inquired about billboard costs. You know how freaking expensive it is to put up a billboard? You get quoted like 20 grand for a run in a good location. Because what's the point in paying for a billboard in a location that nobody's going to see? So we were like, oh, it's election year. We should buy a billboard. And then Nicole was like reaching out to some people who have been like had done a billboard, I think, after Dory passed away, and like people who are down for the cause, right? Still like $20,000. They gave us some
really
options where we could do it a little cheaper, but that's a lot of money. I don't think a billboard on Capitol Hill would cost $20,000. But I want a billboard right next to this billboard that says false.
Lie.
Just lies.
Or one of our big red arrows.
Yes, lies. That's just absurd. I get it that you think that you're doing news that holds powerful people accountable, but one of the fundamental issues with the old media is they refuse to hold themselves accountable. So they want to hold everybody else accountable. And then God forbid you point out that some reporting they did was missing key facts or was biased or whatever, and they get so up in arms about it. It's like, wait. Your job is to hold everyone else accountable, but you refuse to accept any ounce of criticism yourself? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. It's ridiculous. It is one of the biggest problems. And when you have news outlets that won't acknowledge that their reporting has fallen short or that they're failing to hold powerful people accountable, those are the news outlets that you absolutely stay away from. All right. If you're thinking about selling your home at some point this year, we know the Fed cut interest rates, so we're waiting to see really how the real estate market will react to that. Check out a few real estate agents. Please do. Talk to the real estate agent that your mom's brother's, cousin's, son's, sister's, uncle's cat's owner used one time back 20 years ago. Please do that. But also make sure nothing other than Nicole. Somebody's going to get to the bottom of that tree and find out that it involves, I was going to say the I word, but I can't do that on an ad. So check out sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com. He has his team an innovative marketing strategy. And I think where they really shine is getting your home ready for that listing to stand out, because that's what you need. And for Sharona Rhodes and her husband, she was just floored by the exceptional staging job that Wes and his team did.
So now it's, okay, the house is empty and you're seeing all the things that you've never really noticed. Like, oh my goodness, there's a broken baseboard over there. Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness, that looks terrible. And he's like, calm down. Staging will take care of it. Just don't worry about it. They came in and they staged everything. And my 17-year-old daughter just graduated high school. So we went in to look at the house after the stage and she said, Mom, I would buy this house. You've always hated our house. She said, this house is aesthetic. I love this house. Like, okay, 17-year-old child.
Yeah, you could stage it nice, but the proof is in the pudding. And Wes sold, I've never understood that phrase. The proof is in the pudding. What is that from? Who created that? What kind of proof is in the pudding?
Not really in-depth show.
What kind of proof is in the pudding? Let's be honest. Look that up for me. Why am I saying sayings that I don't understand the next stuff? Anyway, Wes sold their house in 6 days for over list price. So I think that's pretty good. Did you figure it out? Anyway, sellwithwes.com, sellwithwes.com, a better way to sell your home. I am super off the rails today, but seriously, where do some of these sayings come from? The proof is in the pudding.
It says the original expression originated in the early 1600s. Let's see. Maybe the expression is used to convey the idea, blah, blah, blah. The word pudding in this expression, savory dish,
You didn't find it, did you?
It really doesn't make
Somebody will look it up. Proof is in the pudding.
I mean, I'm looking at it, but it doesn't really give a good explanation.
All right, can we get to our daily subscriber show poll? I'll just let people know what's going on. So we want to air this interview with Jake, the mom of those two 7th graders, but we're having an issue with the
download
interview. Yeah. So
But
if you could notice, I would have aired it in the first segment, but we're having an issue with it. So I've been just marching forth, hoping that issue would resolve itself, and it has not.
It's working on it.
Okay, Nicole says she's working on it.
So apparently it's hard to tell if pudding is fully cooked until it's eaten. So you just eat it. So the proof is in the pudding.
Oh.
It's cooked if you eat it and it's cooked.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, until you actually see, you won't know if it was a success. So I like that. Proof is in the pudding. All right, so in our daily subscriber show poll, I asked you guys this question because I did an interview yesterday with Dr. Raul Garcia. He's a candidate for U.S. Senate. And one of the topics that I brought up was former President Donald Trump's mass deportation plan, where he wants to go out and for lack of a better phrase, round up illegal immigrants and send them back to their countries of origin. And I've said that I'm skeptical as to whether that's actually feasible, but I didn't ask you about the feasibility of it. I said, do you support and this on Patreon, Locals, and X, do you support former President Donald Trump's proposal to engage in a mass deportation of illegal immigrants? Yes, no, or only those who committed violent offenses? 83% on Patreon saying yes, 16% saying only those who committed violent offenses, 1% saying no, I don't support that at all. If he would actually do it, we need a China-sized wall at both borders now with specific checkpoints to allow legal migration and rapid DNA back to verify the children are with their own parents. There is slavery happening and our tax dollars are allowing it. Yeah, and I think you make a good point in terms of if you're going to engage in any size of a deportation plan, you have to fix the border first, because or else you're going to spend all this time and energy with your federal partners deporting someone from the country, and they're going to come right back. They're going to come right back the way they came the first time, and that's by using the cartel to get across the border or just out in the open across the Rio Grande, because you're just letting them come in. So that doesn't make any sense. You have to fix the border issue first, and if that's not done, if the two parties can't get together to decide how we're going to stop the flow, then engaging in a mass deportation plan is absolutely senseless and useless. Mike H., to paraphrase my non-white immigrant wife from a developing country who originally came here legally on a work visa and is now a U.S. citizen, why the heck did I have to follow one set of rules and they don't have to follow any? I came here to get away from this sort of thing. Yeah, I mean, absolutely the case. And I've heard that some of the angriest people about some of the people who are angriest about our immigration crisis are people who went through the process of getting here legally. Sometimes it took them decades to do that. So on Locals, about the same. A lot of people saying, yes, they support mass deportation or only those who have committed violent crime. John Kenji said, Brandi, I don't feel safe traveling anywhere in America anymore, even more so in rural areas. It's very sad. Oh, that's interesting. UMP03, how can the government get away with the open border? Do we not have laws to prevent this? And how is it that government can pick and choose what laws to follow and there are no repercussions? Yeah, I mean, there are a ton of repercussions. They just aren't personally bearing the responsibility of them because we keep electing politicians who have done this to our country. That's the only real repercussion for a politician who pushes bad policy, is for them not to win re-election. And as we've seen, even the Seattle Times doesn't care if politicians pursue bad policy that has bad outcomes. They'll still endorse them. So there's absolutely no repercussions. It's quite insane, actually. Let me see a couple of you on X. Dan Deegan, sorry. Do you think it's really Dan Keegan and he just changed the first letters so he's a little more anonymous? Deegan? You know, it's Dan Keegan. I think I've figured out your secret, but only after the illegals are housed in the homes of sanctuary Democrats for a few months. After that, they'll leave willingly. Yeah, spend a few months housed maybe with Jay Inslee, and they'll be like, maybe Venezuela wasn't so bad because I've had to live with Jay Inslee and like grind all of my leftover food with a pestle and mortar into chicken feed.
Like that's going to be your fuel. Does he use the fuel that's organic or whatever?
You know what? I guarantee if you look at Governor Inslee's lifestyle, I mean, he jets all over the place. I guarantee he is not living the climate lifestyle that he's trying to push on all of us. Just It's not happening. But I'm going to be posting that interview with Dr. Raul Garcia, again, as U.S. Senate candidate running against Maria Cantwell. And we discussed this conversation. And I actually think he and I are mostly in agreement on it. I just don't believe, not that this question was about feasibility. We don't have the law enforcement to be able to carry out mass deportation. However, hell yeah, I support mass deportation if it's people who've committed violent crimes. Trooper Christopher Gadd would still be alive today if we had had deportation of violent criminals or of criminals in general in this country who came in illegally, continued to commit crime and break our laws. So if at any point the illegal immigrant who killed Trooper Christopher Gadd had been held accountable by being deported, and if we weren't in a sanctuary state and police officers actually knew he was here illegally and could hand him over to the feds, then Trooper Christopher Gadd would still be alive. His wife would have her husband. His child would have their father. So yeah, I mean, I would never say don't deport them. 100%. You already committed a crime coming here, but I understand there's people who've been living here for decades and decades and decades. So I don't think you go pluck them out of their lives and out of their homes, but there has to be some sort of, like, I don't know if it's like, okay, you have permanent residency, but we're never going to give you citizenship because you came in illegally, XYZ. Anyway, all right, we'll get to questions, comments, and then Jaskaran Singh, who's running for state senate, who's the Bellevue landlord who's had that guy in his house for like 2 years. He can't get out of his house. He just released an awesome political ad, so we're going to play it in our closing. Sanity check. First, Zach Abraham and his team at Bulwark Capital are having another one of their Know Your Risk live webinars tomorrow. Is it Wednesday or Tuesday?
It's Wednesday.
Holy smokes, what happened to my life? Tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Pacific time. You can still sign up. KnowYourRiskRadio.com, KnowYourRiskRadio.com. I know one of the things he's going to address is what's happening with the economy nationally, obviously, because that can have an impact on your retirement portfolio. But of course, the Fed dropped interest rates. And so, you know, he has said, and he said on our show last week, I'll play a clip, that he really feels like that was a political decision and they weren't, there was nothing indicating they were ready to drop interest rates. So there's a concern about, okay, well, what is this going to do to our economy 6 months down the road?
If they truly are data dependent, then the debate should have been whether to not cut at all or to go 25 basis points. Where they came up with 50, there's just nothing in the data that suggests that's what they should be doing. As a matter of fact, you've got multiple inflation gauges that have been ticking upwards over the last 3 months. You've got growth and inflation still above the long-term trend lines. You've got unemployment sub 4.5. There's just nothing there. So, you know, I think they're making a huge policy mistake. And I think that you are watching markets, in my opinion, and look, we'll be talking, God willingly, 6 months from now when we have a clearer picture. Yeah. But what I'd be willing to bet at this point is that everything's going way higher and inflation's going to reignite.
Yeah. So obviously that raises questions about your retirement portfolio. So Zach Abraham and his team, they have their latest risk management strategy live webinar to help you with your risk management strategy for your retirement portfolio. So sign up for it. Free live webinar. You can passively listen to it. You can chime in with a few questions if you want. KnowYourRiskRadio.com. KnowYourRiskRadio.com. All right. Some more questions. Two Ladies Midwest Adventures. Questions, comments. We rarely get questions. Nobody has any questions for me? Rarely get questions, just comments, which is fine. Which is fine. Two Ladies Midwest Adventures, $20 super chat. Jenny and Julietta wanted to say hi, and we appreciate all your hard work. Much respect always. Jenny says she loves your cats too, Nicole. Wish we could send you more. Don't send us more. That's great. Thank you so much. Jaja Brownie with a $9.99 super chat for the billboard. Yeah. You know, let's just get think of plywood and just write liars and just put an arrow and set it up on that building and see how long it takes to put it back down. All right, Julie Kennedy Consulting. At high school curriculum night the other night, I learned that next semester, kids will be getting 50% instead of a 0 on their work so that kids don't just want to give up on the class. You know, the quickest way to make them give up is to say, you can still get a 50% if you don't do the assignment. Mm-hmm. Wild stuff. Greg Olakis, parents are part of the problem in this as well and should be held accountable for their actions or lack thereof. in their child's life. Yeah, I don't know how you do that. It is such a conflicting issue, I think, for conservatives in particular who believe in limited government, where I advocate strongly for parental rights, but we as a society have guardrails, right? And if your parenting or lack thereof is leading your child to do something that's hurting society, then you kind of lose some of your rights as a parent. Or if you as a parent are doing things that are hurting your child or are hurting society. So there's a reason in some places if your kid, you give them booze or something and they go out and they, hurt someone or kill someone because they're drunk and partying or something, that you can be held accountable for that. So if your kid is out roaming the streets and is engaged in gang behavior, we should be able to hold parents accountable. We've seen this a few times. Some of these mass shootings.
I know they are doing that with that mass shooting in, where was it, Georgia or whatever, that the parents are being held accountable for that. And I do think that that's a good thing. And then I think that parents need to put more of an emphasis on education, because I have seen that trail off, right? Because people were having instances like we have in Olympia, and teachers and curriculum are getting dismissed because it's not what we want it to be, and it's not. So that's part of the issue, but it's kind of like attendance, and they're saying, well, we have to be family first, and let's take a vacation instead of when it's less busy than during school. And that was just not the emphasis. Like when we were in school, and that was only 25 years ago, but I think it was
5 years ago.
Very important to be at school. You didn't miss school unless you absolutely had to.
You took pride in your attendance. Didn't you have perfect attendance?
I sure did.
Nicole just set that up so I'd literally point out that she had perfect attendance. You saw that, right? You saw that look in her eyes? Totally.
But I think that there was an emphasis put on that, and it was it was almost competition, right? So it brought out the competitiveness and being a student and wanting to do well and be there, and the socialization and all of that was more emphasis was put on it. And I think that we've kind of trailed back from that a little bit. Yeah. And now we're more, I don't know, we have other things to babysit our kids than school teachers. So,
well, and the meritocracy is gone. And I think for white parents too, they're like, well, my kid's screwed either way, so they're just going to get held back. But the meritocracy is gone. So inherently, like a kid in high school doesn't understand the idea of meritocracy, but they do understand the idea that if I work hard and I'm the best, there are rewards for that, right? But if you're being artificially held back, or people who aren't doing the work that you're doing, aren't putting in the work that you're putting in, and they still get the same rewards that you do, there's no motivation for you anymore. I mean, me having higher grades than my siblings, that was a motivation. There was some meritocracy there. We're like, I was my dad's favorite because I was super smart and I did well in school. Let's be honest, I was his favorite.
Oh, I was scared of not only my parents' reaction to bad grades, but my grandparents' reaction to bad grades. Like it was a source of pride. Yes, absolutely. And now it's like we just mentioned, it's like there's no punishment if you don't do well. There's no zeros. There's no fails. It's well, that's more damaging than just putting you through and
don't worry,
letting you deal with it.
It's not your fault. Hundreds of years ago, some people decided to enslave your great ancestors who you may or may not be actually related to, and that's why. And so we're not going to fail you.
What I do think has potential to save us from all this is the going back to putting kids in these trade schools and college programs earlier in high school. Yeah. And, my niece did that. The last 2 years of school, she went half a day at school and half a day in training. And I think that was really beneficial to her and her future. Especially balancing that, not just doing all one and none of the other. But I also think that, back in the day, if there were bad kids in school, they went to a different school. Yeah. They went to a completely different school. And now we're like, no, we can't take them away from the other class. Like that's damaging. But no, you're damaging the people that they're hanging out with. They said we want these gang members to go to regular school where there's kids trying to pass classes with good grades. Yep. No, we don't want them there. Put them in their own school.
100%.
Where they're held to different standards, I guess.
Mark Bennett pointed out a line in the documentary that a lot of people were asking about. He said, I like how the school board member said no way about whether people were leaving the school because of the woke policy, and then immediately followed with, if you don't like the way we're running this, leave. It's such a shocking... He literally said bye. It's Scott Clifford is his name, and he's on the Olympia School Board, and we bookmarked the whole bookshelved? What do you call it? Bookended the whole documentary with his comments, because they're indicative of the whole problem. These aren't rogue teachers. These are teachers that are part of a district where this is pervasive. and where it's told from the top to the bottom that, at the very highest levels at the school board, they are supportive of this behavior. So there are never going to be consequences for these teachers. All right, a couple more. Sean Bell, academics are super hung up on language. They think they invented language. They think invented language makes things so. Yeah, they just make up language to fit what they want. Krista, continuing to blame the pandemic for parental and educator failure is a freaking joke. The pandemic is not even mentioned here anymore, and parents and educators hold themselves accountable for the kids. I imagine you're not in Washington, Krista. Tell me where you're at, because that sounds like you're not here. Captain Cranky Pants on the Seattle Times billboard. I have to wonder who they were trying to convince with that billboard. Yeah, because even on Cap Hill, those are stranger readers up there. And nobody hates the Seattle Times more than the readers from the Stranger. All right, with that, thank you, Nicole.
Well, there's one more super chat. There you go. From Old Sub Sailor.
Oh, Old Sub Sailor to Team Undivided for the great documentary last night. Can't wait for part 2. Yeah, I think we'll probably hold Jake's interview till tomorrow because there's clearly something technologically wrong with it. And we want to make sure it gets good booking in the show, even though I named the show after that interview. So I think I'm going to have to change the name of the entire show, which is fine. Sorry. We'll figure it out. But we do have more follow-ups to do on the show. And please share that documentary with your friends so they can see what's happening, because everybody needs to know that this is a real situation. This isn't some right-wing propaganda. These are kids who are sitting down telling you what they experienced in classrooms, and for already some of these Olympia School District types to be dismissing it as like, oh, these kids have some sort of agenda and this is just fabricated is just indicative of the problem. With that, let's get to our closing sanity check. Blah, blah. All right, Jaskaran Singh, he's the Bellevue landlord who has been on the news because he has a squatter in his rental house who has refused to leave or pay rent for more than 2 years now. So he decided, well, screw this. I'm going to run for Washington State Senate. So he made it past the primary. He's got a campaign going on right now. He just released one hell of a campaign ad.
I left India because of the caste system, which limits opportunities to live up to one's potential based on a social status. America is building its own version under the banner of diversity, equity, and inclusion, also known as DEI.
It's especially important that
Career politician Lisa Wellman pushed bills to install DEI in public schools, higher education, and healthcare. This American caste system is dividing our students into identity groups, removing merit-based achievements and watering down core subjects like math and reading. It creates categories of oppressors and oppressed, leading to discrimination against white, Jewish, and Asian students. Do you want your kids to be treated differently based on where they fall in this new American caste system? A vote for me is a vote for equality, and a vote for Lisa Wellman is a vote for discrimination.
Oh, that's good. I love it. I think it's just out on social media. I'm not sure he has the campaign cash to put it on TV, but that is powerful. Sitting there running against a white lady who's like, thinks she's the wokest anti-discrimination. It's like, no, you're in favor of discrimination if you're in favor of DEI. That's the best campaign ad I've seen in the state so far. That has been your sanity check for today. Reminder, check out our documentary, Operation Indoctrination, a story of academic decline. It is now up across social media platforms for you to like, comment, share your thoughts. We're going to be having follow-ups. And again, I apologize we were going to have the mother of the 2 twin 7th graders on the show today. We have the interview. We're having issues playing it back for some reason. However, we will have that tomorrow. I'm very confident of it. And we also have been monitoring some of the absolute nut job reactions to it. And so we're going to talk about that on the show tomorrow. And I think there's a certain vice principal who ought to get his social media accounts in order, because tomorrow's your day on the show, sir. You know who you are. Too much?
Wow,
no,
that was
not
my
enough?
favorite tease.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Favorite tease ever.
That has been today's episode of Undivided. It's not cheap to make a documentary, so if you want to support our show, we sure would appreciate it. undividedpod.com. Help us work towards that billboard to counter the Seattle Times billboard of lies. undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com. You can become a subscriber on one of our platforms, Patreon, Locals, or X, just $5 a month. We will see you back here on the live show tomorrow at noon.